What's up, Flannelverse? I guess I'll set the stage for this a little bit. So in the fall, I was doing a DFS show with Davis Maddock, and I mentioned I've never played Dynasty fantasy football leagues before, and I'm kind of obsessed with fantasy football. So it was kind of weird that I've never played in a Dynasty league. Davis said, I bet I could get you into a league. People are coming and going all the time. I can find a Dynasty league for you. Fast forward a month or two, and Davis tells me, JJ Zachariason. I meant to ask you how you pronounce your last name. JJ, how do you pronounce your last
That's
name?
right. That's right. You got it. You nailed it.
Zachariason.
Yeah, you're one of the few who actually have nailed it, so you're good.
I go back and forth between Zachariason and Zachariason, so I'm glad I got it right on the first try.
Yeah.
So Davis tells me JJ Zachariason is leaving an industry league that I'm in. Do you have interest in taking over his roster? And of course, I was like, hell yeah, JJ Zachariason. I know it's going to be a good roster if it was JJ's team. So I was excited to take over. Fun industry league. A lot of people that I know or don't know that well within the industry. So excited to be in the league. And this show, I'm basically just going to pick JJ's brain on two things. First of all, what I should do with my team if he has thoughts, and he's just informed me he doesn't even remember who is on the team, so it'll be fun to go over it once again. But so we're going to take a look at my team, but also just I have dynasty questions in general because again, this is my first dynasty league ever, and I'm here with one of the sharpest minds in fantasy football who also does a lot of work with dynasty specifically. So excited to be here with JJ Zachariason. JJ, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I appreciate the kind words. I remember. Look, I remember the foundational pieces of that team, and there are really, really good foundational pieces. It was more of a, for anyone wondering, I'm in a lot of leagues, and that I'm trying to, that league is a best ball format, and a lot of times in industry leagues and best ball formats, in season and stuff, in the management and whatnot, it's easy for it to kind of take the back seat to the other leagues that you're managing day to day. And I wanted to just make sure that I was prioritizing the right leagues and stuff like that. And that's why I let it go. I mean, we'll get into it, but like, I think there's a lot of pieces that you can play with and that, you can still turn this thing around and make, because right now it's kind of like a 4th to 6th best team in the league. Maybe, I think last year got like 4th or 5th or something like that. But there's still pieces there that you can do a lot with for sure.
I told you this team is sort of made for the had us in the first half meme, because I started looking through like the quarterbacks, totally elite. The running backs, like as good as you can possibly get. I mean, close, very, very good running backs. And then you get to the receivers, and like there are some pieces there, but I can also see how this team like was built to be a championship team, and then some of those wide receivers kind of fell off. We'll get into.
Yeah,
I'll bring up maybe I should just bring up the team right now as we're talking about it. That was going to be my first question, was why are you giving up this league? And you kind of just answered that. How many leagues are you in right now?
I've tried to cut down on, so like when the pandemic hit, I ended up like, everyone's like, I got to do something to get my mind off of what's going on right now in the world. And I joined a decent bit. At that point I was in probably like 16 or 17 dynasty leagues. But now I'm closer to like 11 or 12, I want to say, maybe even fewer than that. Cause some of them, the other thing too, is like some just end up folding, which is unfortunate. And then some, people just lose interest, and then it's easier to kind of back out and be like, hey, if you can find someone else to manage this team. I try, whenever I back out, I don't want to back out in with a team that's completely dead. Like that's not fair to the league, and it's not fair to whoever's taking it over. And you can see with this team right here, like there's still some decent pieces in there that from like just strictly a value perspective, if you were to plug it into a website where you can find the value of that team, I'm sure it would be a top half team in the league just in terms of overall value. But again, there's a lot that, like, from just like a team construction standpoint, there's got to be some moves that need to be made. And I just was not prepared to be that person to do that work.
Yeah, honestly, I think that this is a pretty strong team. I was happy to see that this is a team I'm picking over, and we'll see. I mean, the players you see on screen right now, you're probably looking at this and drooling at how good this team is. We've got Josh Allen, number 2, I think, overall dynasty quarterback. Justin Herbert also there at quarterback. And I should mention that this is a best ball team, which I was informed of before I joined and completely forgot until I was looking at the rules the other day. I was like, oh, this is best ball format. That's interesting. But yeah, really strong quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert feels very good. Running backs, we have Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris as a 4th best running back feels pretty good. And even Cam Akers and Rashawn Ali, I feel like are usable pieces, or at least good to have on the roster. So pretty strong start here at running back. yeah, I guess how would you grade the let's start with just these two positions, quarterbacks. I mean, this has got to be an A, right? Josh Allen, Justin Herbert.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, and I would say, yeah. I mean, like, you can't in a super flex format, you won't get much better than like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. I remember the draft for this league. I went with what they call a productive struggle, where you just get younger assets and you kind of are playing the value game more than anything else. Because in Dynasty, it's really there's two main pillars to Dynasty, where in redraft, season long, best ball, whatever, you're really just looking for production that year. Like, you don't. Like, of course, you're trying to, like, if you're doing a, high volume number of best ball drafts, you're trying to extract as much value as you can per draft, because you're doing many, many drafts. You know that this guy's going to fall in this draft, this guy won't fall in this draft, etc. But, in Dynasty, you are concerned about the value equation, because you want to have that currency on your roster. And so, for that year one, I ended up just kind of punting the season and then just getting some hits, from the younger assets. And then at times turning them over. I remember trading, like, I think it was J.K. Dobbins and Michael Pittman and maybe like a late second for Christian McCaffrey, which was a really good turn for me, because it was before, it was well before the McCaffrey like injury stuff happened. And so, like, you make trades and you get to a point where, where this is at now. I remember I even traded up for Jahmyr Gibbs in the rookie draft and stuff like that. I made some horrible trades as well. But the interesting thing about this team is that typically when I'm building a dynasty roster, it looks nothing like this. I usually am going with a really, really strong wide receiver room. And I kind of let running back be the last piece that I am concerned with, similar to a real NFL team, or at least how a real NFL team should build. But this team, the strength is the quarterback and running back room, whereas the weakness is more at wide receiver.
I imagine, based on what I have read from the ZAP model this year, and I have to admit, I've never read the late round guide before. I think last year, actually, I met up for coffee with a guy here in Minnesota who, just like a random guy who messaged me, and really nice guy, but he was telling me how much he loved the draft guide. And I was like, oh, nice. Is that really good? Yeah, this is sweet. Last year. And this is before I had ever read it. So I was like, okay, I need to read that going forward. There's just so much fantasy content out there. And I wasn't really familiar with your work, a year and a half ago, whatever it was. But yeah, reading it this year, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like really, really good stuff. Really, really great work here. But I imagine Jahmyr Gibbs probably rated pretty well in the ZAP model. Is that accurate?
He did. And so, like, the ZAP model, I kind of make iterations of it, or at least try to improve upon it each year. Because I get, new testing data and stuff like that, just based on another year of players and such. Like, you can run into a lot of issues modeling in football, where in fantasy football, where you're overfitting and you're working with like too small of a sample size. So, like, I'm pretty strict with working from 2011 onward to make sure that overfitting is really, really difficult, because there's so many players in the sample. Like in the running back ZAP model, for instance, has like almost 500 running backs in it. And the wide receiver model has almost like 700 wide receivers in it. So, like, there's a lot of sample there where it's very difficult to be like, okay, Puka Nacua had this crazy good season, so therefore the model is going to overfit for that 5th round or whatever round wide receiver, that profile that Puka Nacua had. Whereas if you're going back to like 2019 or something like that, or 2018, it would be a lot easier for that model to overfit to Puka Nacua and say, okay, what did he do well in college that we missed? He had a good yards per route run rate, good targets per route run rate. He just didn't run many routes. So therefore, our model is now going to really highlight and hone in on those specific aspects. Those aspects might matter, but probably not to the degree in which you're making them matter because of that Puka Nacua hit. So I say all that because, I'm not letting each individual like year, like Bucky Irving and what he did last year did not influence, the edits and the fixes that were made to the ZAP model this year. But as I'm iterating and kind of improving on the model every year, some of it is just me like coming up with different ideas on how to like look at these stats, because there's not that many statistics or like readily available statistics out there for college football. And so as I do that, I get new scores for players. Like, when Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs were drafted, the model liked Bijan more than Gibbs. Right now, the model actually likes Gibbs a little bit more than Bijan. Now, I personally like Bijan more than Gibbs, but like based on how they were as prospects, it actually does prefer Gibbs. Gibbs was like a top 5 prospect in the model's history, because the running back model is very, very focused on receiving metrics, and we can get into all of that if you want. But It's very focused on receiving metrics, and he obviously, is a pass catcher first and foremost. So it does favor Jahmyr Gibbs quite a bit.
I think I was just reading, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I was just reading something that you'd written maybe in your newsletter about Jarquez Hunter and how he is, looks pretty good this year as a late round flyer. Do you think that his, like your evaluation of Hunter maybe has kind of reflect some of the smaller backs that we've seen recently having some success? Like, do you think he would have looked as good to you 2 years ago as he does right now?
Probably not to the degree. I think that like just naturally, you see certain things happen. You see the NFL evolve, and even like subjectively, not even model based, but you become a little bit more open minded about how these guys might be used and how a particular team might use them. I think with Jarquez Hunter in particular, to me, what kind of annoys me is that I was really into him pre-draft, like very into Jarquez Hunter pre-draft. Like when I was going on shows and stuff, he was always my, when they're like, give me a sleeper in this draft, it was always Jarquez Hunter. And then of course now he's getting steamed up because of the landing spot from a dynasty perspective. And look, like I do think the landing spot though matters a lot for that kind of archetype where you have a sort of smaller, maybe just not a big back, but you're landing in an offense where we've seen, Sean McVay use smaller backs and Kyron Williams in particular. And really like, if you look at what they've done, they had Kyron Williams, they draft Blake Corum, who was kind of a duplicate of Kyron Williams, and then they draft Jarquez Hunter, who's a duplicate size-wise of those two backs as well. And if you think about and this is where like I use the model as sort of a baseline for my thinking, and then I just use my football knowledge and more of the subjective analysis to kind of layer on top of that, right? And if you like look at what Sean McVay has said and sort of what that entire like coaching tree kind of abides by and talks about is that they typically rotate their running backs by drives and not by down and distance because they don't want the defense to know what's coming, which is very intuitive. It makes a ton of sense, right? And so when they draft a guy like Blake Corum, my thought is, oh, well, then they'll probably go 2 drives Kyron, 1 drive Blake Corum, 2 drive. And I think that they ideally wanted to kind of do that and want to do that. And then they do that with Jarquez Hunter. And it's like, okay, well, they want another one of these players that they can seamlessly kind of insert into their lineup and go from there. The difference is that like Jarquez Hunter has a lot more explosiveness than the other two guys. Like you said, like in the model, he is a little bit smaller, but the model does look at running back weight as an input, and players can still overcome. Like whenever I tell people that, they're like, oh, it must hate Devon Achane, it must hate Jahmyr Gibbs, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the case at all. It actually likes those running backs. James Cook, it actually liked those running backs because they're making up for that size in other areas of their profile, like the receiving end of the profile, and the explosiveness end of the profile when you're looking at things like speed scores. So it's when you get a small running back who doesn't have a receiving profile and who isn't explosive, that's when you're like, there's almost zero chance. Because like every small running back that's hit over the last 5 years or so, you can point to something that they like. Devon Achane had a great production profile and was really explosive. Jahmyr Gibbs had a great receiving profile, was really explosive. Kyron Williams was not explosive, but his receiving profile was amazing at Notre Dame. Bucky Irving, even last year, like terrible explosiveness and like speed score, but even his receiving profile was pretty strong. So like there's always sort of like puzzle pieces that you're kind of putting together to formulate this story and this narrative about each player. And the ZAP model kind of helps me put that together.
Okay, interesting. First of all, hello to Tyler. EMAC, congrats on becoming the oldest person on the planet. We just saw a 116-year-old nun died in Brazil, and suddenly EMAC is the oldest person on the planet. So congrats to EMAC. Good to see you here.
Good to see EMAC, man. I did a show with EMAC way back in the day, and it's one of the greatest people in this space.
Yeah, gotta love EMAC. I did not know that you knew EMAC. That's good
man.
to hear. Like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. Let's talk. I want to talk briefly about the ZAP model and highly recommend the late round prospect guide to anybody who has not already read it. Again, I looked at it maybe a little bit last year, but this is the first year that I've really gotten into it. I'm like, man, this is intense stuff. Like you can tell that you put a lot of work into this a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
When did you start working on the ZAP model?
Yeah, I'd say 2019 into 2020. I had a really rough 2019 season, and I said to myself, the reason this was bad is because I didn't really have a process. Like I was kind of going by what other people said and kind of doing. Look, a lot of analysts do this where they're just kind of like taking bits and pieces from other people, and some of them can do it very well. They're like they can take in the news and sift through it in a really logical way and take only the important pieces, and they can be very good players and very good analysts in doing so. I'm not that great at doing, like, I need to do that thing. I need to be building that thing that other people can take, and I don't care, but I need to at least like get my hands dirty and figure out a good process that I know I can rely on year in and year out. So after that 2019 season, I built the model. Looking back and sort of like the things that I've learned about just about math and about like how all of this works, because I'm not, I didn't go to college and studied it. I mean, I took statistics courses throughout high school and college and stuff. I was always really good at math, but it wasn't like my major, right? And so you just kind of learn a lot as you go on. I think now it's in a really, really good spot. This is the fourth iteration of the prospect guide. So, my idea with the prospect guide was to say, look, guys, I'm putting this out there. You can use it as you wish. I've tested this. I know that it's, better than ADP. I know that it's more impactful than draft capital. So I know that it can work and it can be really beneficial. But look, at the end of the day, I'm just going to throw it out there to show you what's in this so that you don't have any questions about me, like grifting you or doing something insane. This is all real. Like my wife can attest, in the month of January, I am just like looking at these numbers and compiling data and testing things to, improve the ZAP model and make it more useful. So it's been like a, 5 or 6 year thing at this point. It started out as the Z prospect model. And then last year I renamed it to the ZAP model because I made some pretty big changes to it. And I think now, like, I'm in a pretty good spot with it where I feel good about, the testing that I've done and sort of the inputs that are in it.
Yeah, I feel like you just read like the preamble where you kind of explain what goes into it, and I don't think anybody's going to have any doubts that you're grifting them with this. Is clearly a lot of work has gone into it.
Yeah, people will be people.
Yeah, good point. I say nobody will have doubts. Yeah. I forget that people are people. Nobody with a brain is going to have any doubts that you've put a lot of work into it, and it's clearly very good work. I was listening to a little bit of the show that Overzet did, and your guy David Kitchen was on the show, and he was talking about how you would not allow him to touch the adjustments on draft night because you get so much excitement. I think he was joking, but because you get so much excitement out of just seeing the numbers change as you actually put in the draft capital for each player.
It's fun, man. And you get in, like, we, on my Discord and stuff, and like people are like anxiously awaiting for like what the score is going to be. And I can like when Ashton Genty got drafted, all I tweeted was 99.7, and people were like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, it's fun, right? Like that's what this is about for me, right? Like, it's about just like, we're all super nerdy. We all just like are huge nerds for this stuff, and like, let's do this together. Like, this is not gatekeeping anything, there's nothing like that. Now, there are certain things, like I get asked a lot, like, are you going to release old scores of players? And the reason I don't do that is because I just don't want to be inundated with emails and questions about, like, because like you would be shocked by, like, what certain players' scores are who ended up busting. You're like, oh, this model sucks because this one player is bad. But that's just the way it works. Like, that's the way that modeling works in general. And there would just be way more questions than answers if I were to do that. So that's the reason I don't do it. But I mean, if people ask and they want like an old score of somebody, I'm always willing to, pull it up.
Comes back to just people being people and not understand that, like, nobody's going to have 100% hit rate. Nobody's going to have a 90% hit rate on all of their top. So just people are kind of can be idiots sometimes. Clearly. So I recall, and I thought it was kind of cool to see. I read the guide, not front to back, but like I read the rankings and read parts of it before the draft happened. And you kind of you lay out in that version of it before the draft that you're using projected draft capital now, and these are going to adjust based on where draft capital ends up happening. It was kind of cool to see some of like the players flipping around based on where they landed. The one that comes to mind to me is Luther Burden, who you really liked in your pre-draft stuff. I think you said that if there was a player that's we named after, it would be Luther Burden. But he dropped like pretty considerably in the rankings. I mean, maybe like your 4th or 5th overall wide receiver in this iteration due to draft capital. Do you also have a, like, not just draft capital, but landing spot? Does that come into play at all? Like the roster around the player, does that affect things at all?
Yeah, so that's the question I get a lot, and the answer is no. And it's frustrating to some people, but I think it's also one of those things where if we let landing spot influence things too much, we often sort of lose sight of what our goals are, which is to get really good players who often create their own opportunity. And they also will see completely different opportunity and circumstances, even in a year later. Like, that's part of the reason why I like Emeka Egbuka and Luther Burden, both of them landing in these situations where they're in crowded wide receiver rooms. I'm still drafting them in Dynasty because, we saw it with JSN. And now, look, people use Jackson Smith and Jigba as sort of the example here of like, don't let landing spot dictate too much because, JSN ended up landing with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And then obviously things shift and change. And then look what he did last year. And now he's, easily a wide receiver one in Dynasty. The one thing I will say is that I will let landing spot dictate things a little bit more when we're talking about lower tiered prospects, because lower tiered prospects are going to need sort of that shot, that opportunity where they're not going to be able to climb their depth chart as seamlessly as someone like JSN I can't remember exactly where he was drafted, somewhere in the 20s, like early 20s, I think 21st overall, maybe 22nd overall, something around there. But JSN still had a ZAP score of 98 in the model, which is crazy for a player. Like, that's better than Tet McMillan, who went in the top 10 in the draft. So like, JSN's prospect profile was out of control good, right? And so him creating the opportunity that he created and balling out and playing well was not a shock to me from the standpoint of like how he looked as a prospect. Now there were some question marks after year one, but like, that's a player where you can say, okay, I'm going to invest in that because he's just such a good prospect and something will eventually work out for him. I feel similarly to a degree, maybe not to that degree, with like Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka, where they're both very, very good prospects. And, draft, like their current draft capital is reflecting the situation enough where I'm just, like rookie draft capital, that is their ADP. Sure. It's reflecting that situation enough where I'm like, sure, I'll just take a chance on these guys because their scores also look pretty good. But when you're talking about like, these like lower tiered guys who also fall into bad situations, it's a lot harder to sort of buy into them and say, yeah, I'll go all in on this player when, there's just way more question marks with that.
So I want to talk about our team some more, but before we leave talking about the ZAP model. So you noted that this is you're kind of looking at the first 3 years of a player's career when you're looking at stuff historically. And so I assume that the ZAP model is made mostly for dynasty leagues. Is that a fair assumption? Would you adjust your rankings at all for like redraft leagues and or best ball leagues? Like, because I'm tempted to just use your exact rankings as I'm drafting in best ball. But I'm like, well, maybe this is a player who's going to do better in year two. And Colston Loveland, we'll talk about my first draft pick in our league. But he's somebody that like is probably going to be better, not this year, but 2026 after Cole Kmet maybe leaves. Is there are there any adjustments that you think people should be making to these rankings if they're drafting for like best ball this year? Would your rankings be a little bit different than your rankings in the ZAP model?
They would, but I also want to throw the caveat out there that I've like last year especially, I did a lot of research on using the ZAP model to help in season-long leagues, and there are pockets in drafts. Like for instance, if you're in the middle rounds, a place like Underdog, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to sort of translate this because obviously, like last year on UD, it was just so wide receiver heavy. So whenever I talk about middle round wide receivers, I'm really talking about like round 3 to 5 wide receivers over there. But generally speaking, like one of the main reasons I was on Brian Thomas so heavy last year, he was my highest rostered wide receiver in best ball, was because not to say that I had a great best ball season, but that was at least the W for me. But a lot of that was driven by the fact that when you had a wide receiver fall into that range ADP wise, who had a ZAP score as good as Brian Thomas's ZAP score was, that player hit at like an insane rate. Like they exceeded ADP expectation by 3 or more PPR points per game at like a 40 to 45% rate, which is out of control. Like usually the mean is like 15 to 20%. So you had like a 2 to 3x better chance of that kind of player hitting. And so I've used, and I sort of layered on top, ZAP scores, with season long, but there are instances like a really good example of this is I have a giant tier in rookie drafts this year of Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, RJ Harvey, and Caleb Johnson. And I call it the choose your own adventure tier, because you have these two wide receivers where I think from a projection standpoint, Matthew Golden looks a little bit better than Luther Burden in 2025, but I like Luther Burden, the talent, more than Matthew Golden. So I like if you have patience and you can be patient with your roster, maybe lean Luther Burden. And then at running back, RJ Harvey has the projection this year, but I think Caleb Johnson has arguably a more intriguing career-long ceiling than RJ Harvey, not just because of the age factor and stuff like that, but the Steelers, perfect situation for him as well. I know RJ Harvey obviously fell into the perfect spot, but Pittsburgh runs the kind of offense that Caleb Johnson should be able to thrive in. It's funny, Caleb Johnson's top two comps in the model were James Conner and Le'Veon Bell, two Pittsburgh Steeler Mike Tomlin era running backs. And so Caleb Johnson going there with Jaylen Warren, obviously my cap is ceiling a little bit, but Jaylen Warren's a free agent next year. There's a very real chance that Caleb Johnson is a bell cow back, which, by the way, until like 2 years ago, everyone used to talk about Mike Tomlin teams having bell cow running backs and it being such an edge that you can always just draft the Steelers running back and you're going to get a lot of volume. They could easily go back to that if Caleb Johnson just shows out here in year one. And I think a lot of this like gets adjusted in the market generally. So like, you could think of it as, I'll probably see Caleb Johnson. I think RJ Harvey's fine, even where he's going right now. Like my projections have him at like RB 19 or so, or something around there. So like I think RJ Harvey is in a good spot. So don't think that I'm talking down on him, but like Caleb Johnson, if you see him in the same tier as RJ Harvey in my rookie rankings or in the ZAP model, and then you see a huge discrepancy in redraft, it probably signals that you might see Caleb Johnson as a value, because the ZAP model clearly likes him. And I'm looking at the first 3 years of their NFL career in terms of what I'm trying to predict here. A third of that is their rookie season, right? And generally speaking, good players end up doing well during their rookie season. It's very predictive for what's to come after that. So yes, chances are you can use a lot of this. Like if there's a player that you're shocked by their ZAP score and you're like, wow, why is that so high? He'll probably do pretty well, or at least be somewhat of a value from a season-long perspective too.
Interesting. You brought up last year best ball, and so before we get to, we are going to get back to the league that I'm taking over, the team that I'm taking over for JJ. But I'm curious. So last year you did the Becoming a Best Ball Bro series on your YouTube channel. I saw you caught a lot of flack for it on socials. Just people like I want your Dynasty content only. Yeah. It was kind of funny how people were like didn't want you doing new types of content. Are you bringing it back this year? Do you know yet if are you going to be doing a lot of best ball content this year, or are you just going to stick to Dynasty stuff and regular?
I'll say stay tuned, and some cool stuff is coming. Mr. Kitchen and I are cooking something up.
Very cool. Love to hear that. Looking forward to seeing what you have cooking. All right. So, we'll probably, we're going to be all over the place, I think, in the show, because I have no real set agenda. This is kind of a one-off. Just, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the team, what I should do with the team, get some tips from you for Dynasty in general. I promised JJ last night that I'm not going to try to make him co-manage this team with me, because my very first decision I had to make, I went straight to JJ and was like, hey, what do you think of my draft pick here? So let's get back to the team. So I'm calling the quarterbacks an A. The running backs I think are an A+. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Najee Harris, and then Cam Akers, Rasheen Ali. Would you agree with that assessment that this is an A+ running back room?
Yeah, and look, in Dynasty, you can really have a 1 to 2 year outlook and window for running backs, which is another reason why, if you go back to the RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson thing, like I've just split it completely across my leagues. Like I've been in positions, because usually they'll go in the back half of the first round, and I had plenty of picks there this year, and I've gotten Caleb Johnson at times. Usually RJ Harvey's going ahead, so when it's similar to you playing the ADP game in best ball, right? Where if you see a guy slip past ADP, like RJ Harvey in a league goes 110 or 111, and I get him there, sometimes he's going 107. So I'm like, okay, this is where I'll get my RJ Harvey exposure and such. But that's why I don't fault anyone if they want to go with who I think is the inferior prospect in RJ Harvey versus Caleb Johnson. I think Caleb Johnson is just a lot more solidified, He's like the bigger body guy who we know is going to take on a big workload or can take on a big workload. Whereas RJ Harvey's sort of that like spark plug, like he's got the explosiveness to his game, but he's a little bit older. Like there's some red flag stuff to his profile. But what I'm getting at is if someone wants to just say, hey, I'm only going to have a 1, maybe 2-year outlook window wise with my running backs, because we know there's a crazy turnover at the position and there can be a crazy turnover, and they want to go RJ Harvey and they want to go all in, like I'm not going to really fault that, because I understand the situation is just like pristine for RJ Harvey to crush it. So with this running back room, you have Gibbs, who's sort of like that foundational piece, and then Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, you're looking at probably, at least for CMC, maybe a 1 to 2 more years of elite production. Saquon Barkley, probably the same thing, maybe 3 if you're fortunate, but at least Jahmyr Gibbs is there to kind of be like a foundational piece. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'd at least give the running back room an A, because you're going to get, I mean, those are 3 first-round redraft picks, right? With those 3 guys, so you should be in a good spot.
Yeah, I suppose when I say A+, I do mean for like a win now. If I'm trying to win right now, I feel like these are 3 A+. This is an A+ running back room. Jim says Dave has already proclaimed best ball is beatable this year, so that content should really be something. yeah, that was a fun clip from Kitchen.
You can't find a different approach to like that kind of thing of Kitchen versus me, just in terms of like proclamations and stuff like that, where I'm always like living in this insane gray area, and he's like, you know what? It's beatable. I really think it's beatable.
I'm definitely way more on your side of that spectrum than the Kitchen side, but I really enjoy it. And clearly you do too, because you just hired the guy as your CEO. Richie says, Neil, I just took over a Dynasty League team and have never done a Dynasty before. I picked 1-9 and 111 this season. I have no clue what to do. LateRound.com, right? You can find the prospect guide, LateRound.com. Yeah. How much is it right now for the
$19.99 for the prospect guide?
That's a pretty good deal. So you can check that out. And of course, we'll be talking about picks also. So maybe you can find some help in this show. All right. So we went over, I gave an A and an A+ to the quarterbacks and the running backs. The wide receivers, a little bit more questionable, I would say. There are some definite hits here, but you can also see like, man, Deontay Johnson. Like I would love what I thought Deontay Johnson was last year on this team. Would have been really helpful. Now, huge question mark there on Deontay Johnson. But it's actually like I remember this team as having like a D-level wide receiver room the first time I read it, and then I went back looking at the team yesterday. I was like, it's actually not as bad as I remember, because it has AJ Brown, who's like a clear, like he's a wide receiver 1, pretty strong wide receiver. Oh, and also Tank Dell. Like speaking of like how good this team could have been, this could have been like a major champion team if Tank Dell was healthy. Deontay Johnson, but we've got like I said, we have AJ Brown, we have DK Metcalf. I should say I am, again, I'm not trying to make a co-manager team with me, but I've got DK Metcalf. Thanks to you. Khalil Shakir kind of broke out last year. And then, Michael Wilson's pretty okay.
It needs help.
The wide receiver room needs help. I would still probably give this team like a C. I think a C is probably fair for this wide receiver room. And I think it got pretty unlucky, like in the way some of these players have fallen recently. How would you rate this wide receiver room?
Yeah, I mean, look, there were some moves that we were talking about earlier, the other day. Like this team could have been so stacked if I just didn't make any moves. But regardless, the wide receiver room, this feels like a team where I would try to legitimately probably flip like a Justin Herbert, because we know. So here's the way that I like just generally think about this stuff. Where am I deficient? Okay, we're deficient at wide receiver here, right? And so how can I beef that up and make that better? Not only that, but wide receiver is going to matter a lot in this kind of format where it's full PPR and it's a best ball format and you're starting more wide receivers and all that kind of stuff. So like wide receiver matters a good bit. And clearly, just given the sheer number of wide receivers on the team, I've been trying to just get bodies there to maybe hit, right? And so what I would probably do is, again, I look at Dynasty from a value and production standpoint, right? Where you got one pillar of the value, one pillar of the production. Sometimes those two things meet and you get Josh Allen and you get Jahmyr Gibbs. And sometimes the production is better than the value. Like I would say Christian McCaffrey right now, where the production is going to look better than the overall value because we know that he's on the tail end of his career, right? Justin Herbert's someone who more than likely is not going to be like a year in, year out top 6 quarterback in fantasy football, right? Like the only way that kind of archetype would kind of beat the mold would be to do what Joe Burrow did last year and play on a team that's going to throw the ball a lot and have these beastly wide receivers, which we know is not happening with Justin Herbert. No shade to Justin Herbert. He's great. I'm just saying that he's not, he can be mobile, but he's not that mobile, right? In terms of how they use him. And he's in the short term, at least, going to be in this offense that's going to be more conservative than not. We've seen that with Greg Roman historically, even though they did start to throw the ball a little bit more down the stretch last year. But if you look at like a trade calculator, or if you look at how the market is sort of valuing Justin Herbert, he's consistently going to be like a top 10 quarterback in Dynasty. And so that's one of those situations where value-wise, you have Justin Herbert, that's great. But this team is in a situation where you have the anchor at Josh Allen. Like, what if you traded Justin Herbert for Baker Mayfield and a wide receiver, and you then added to a wide receiver 3 type, and you added to that rotation while probably not losing that much production at quarterback, right? Hypothetically. Those are the kinds of moves that I just couldn't sit down and like do, which is why, you're owning and managing the team now. But that's the way that I would look at this roster, is say, okay, look, you're getting stronger at tight end at this point. You have Dallas Goedert as like a short-term fix as long as he's healthy, where he can be like a low-end 1, right? And then you have Colston Loveland for the future. And then every once in a while you'll get the Tyler Conklin, the Will Dissly, and the Dawson Knox like spiked weeks, and they'll be able to find your lineup. So like, because of the Loveland pick that you made, I think the tight end room is like fine enough. Where you really need to beef things up is at wide receiver. And the way I would do that is to find the players that are sort of the value, right? But maybe not the production, and swapping them for more of that production. And you would hypothetically be able to compete sooner than not.
So let's talk about the pick that I made. So I reached out to JJ last night. I told him what I wanted to do, and I kind of wish that I had not led the witness and just let you tell me your thoughts, because the way I phrased it to you was, I'm leaning towards taking Loveland here. And I should tell people, this is a tight end premium league. Yeah. Also my first tight end premium league, by the way. So this is all brand new to me. But I was like, well, this is like looking through your prospect guide. I was like, the rating that you have, the ZAP score for Colston Loveland wasn't that much worse than I could have. It was basically between Loveland and Egbuka for me, were the 2 picks that I was considering. And I'm kind of wondering today, because I remember, like, I read the preamble to your guide a while ago, that like, but the tight end model isn't quite as robust. Like, it's newer than the wide receiver and the running back model. And maybe I'm like sort of looking at the scores wrong. So going back to, if I had not led the witness, do you think you would have just taken Egbuka there? Like, did I screw up by taking Loveland over Egbuka, or do you think it was a fine pick in tight end premium?
I think it's fine in tight end premium. I think what you did is what, because of that pick, I would then focus heavily on continuing to add at wide receiver. I'd probably still be adding at wide receiver, even if you picked Egbuka, but it would change the dynamic a little bit in terms of like what I would be targeting. The thing with tight end that I do think is important to note is that so clearly in fantasy football at tight end, you're only going to have a select few tight ends that are going to be like massive difference makers, right? Yep. And so what that means is that your probability just generally of finding like the usable tight end is going to be lower. Now, Colston Loveland, he ranks very well in the model. Like he ranks pretty favorably to like a Sam Laporta type player, right? In terms of just his overall score. And so like I like Colston Loveland like as a talent, and as a player for a roster like this. But the one thing that I always am weary of, so don't think that I'm saying that it was a bad pick, because I don't think it was a bad pick at all in tight end premium. The one thing that I'm always weary of with tight ends is that they tend to not have the same type of value from the value equation piece as you will get at wide receiver and at running back, where like, even if you look like right now, Brock Bowers is, a top 8 type select, and tight end premium even higher type selection in Dynasty, but he's also a rarity, and he just broke every record. And he's like literally like if his career goes the way that we think it'll go, he'll be arguably the best receiving tight end of all time. Right. Yeah. And so like, he's an outlier. He's not the same. He's not the norm. Whereas if you look at like Travis Kelce's career, and you look at his ADP, his startup ADP, which is one way to sort of gauge what the market is feeling and how the market's feeling and what the market's doing. Travis Kelce's ADP was never was very rarely like top 6, top 7 and stuff. Like it was very, very rarely like round 1 type player. And so what that tells you is that he might be producing to that kind of edge that you can get, but the value that you're gaining on your team is going to be greater if you had an elite running back or a wide receiver. So if you're throwing darts in a rookie draft to find that elite player, if both Colston Loveland and Emeka Egbuka hit, you're going to see more value out of Emeka Egbuka than Colston Loveland. But you might get more production for a tight end premium league out of a guy like Colston Loveland. So that's kind of the way that I like generally view tight end, where it's like, I'm not going to force it in rookie drafts, but I'm okay with drafting them in rookie drafts.
Okay. That makes sense. And I feel okay about the pick after all that.
It's a really awkward spot in rookie drafts this year.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. Like if you were 3 spots later, you would have sort of the exact same kind of decision to make, which sucks. It's just like a tier break right there. So
that actually was an option that I had, and I maybe should have taken it. So somebody offered me, I believe, the 1.10 and the 3.3 for my 1.8 and 3.8. And I feel like maybe I should have taken that and just let it fall to me who I picked there.
I mean, for what it's worth, like the teardrop, I think happens pretty severely at 108, in particular 108, because at 106, 107, you're going to get Travion and Quinshon Judkins. And like, I prefer Travion, but like Quinshon, again, from a production standpoint, it should be there like right away if you have that like year 1 to 1 year to 2 year window. So even in a league that I was in, I had the 108 and I needed running back help. And I knew that in season, I wasn't going to have enough flexibility to like really like sit down and make like smart moves to like get a running back that I really needed to fill that roster out. So what I did was I actually traded Rome Odunze for the 108 in that draft. And then I was sitting there with the 108. And and I actually wrote this up in a newsletter just now, but with Rome Odunze, for instance, I put this in my Discord and I got some pushback from people where they were like, why are you giving up Rome Odunze for the 108? Well, the way I see it is Odunze, we already have information from year 1 that he did not live up to expectation, right? With Odunze. And then his team goes out and drafts 2 pass catchers with their first 2 picks in the draft. And so we're really holding on to this idea that Odunze was this really good prospect, which he was, and that, he's in this new offensive system. And so therefore Odunze is going to be better in year 2. But the way I see it, we call it a re-roll, if you will, where worst case scenario, 108, I was going to get like a Emeka Egbuka, which is not a very, like Odunze's ZAP score was like 96.5 last year. And Egbuka's is 95.8. They were a very similarly scored prospect, but the difference is that we haven't seen Egbuka play in the NFL. We have seen Odunze play, and he hasn't been very good. Like not to say that he can't be good. I recognize like he comps pretty favorably to like DeAndre Hopkins. So there is some fear that ceiling's there, but I traded Odunze straight up for the 108 because I knew that worst case scenario, I would get Egbuka and I could be flexible. If someone didn't draft Quinshon Judkins, then I would just be able to get him at 108. Well, I knew that Judkins was going to go 107 after doing a little bit more research and seeing how the draft unfolded. I just threw a late 3rd and just to move up 1 spot because I knew the tier was dropping there. So the trade that you're mentioning where like that trade, you should have just gotten the 3rd instead of sending back a 3rd.
Right.
Because
that makes sense.
Because if they're approaching you, they're saying, I really want a particular guy in that spot, and the delta of like 6 spots in round 3 is almost nothing versus 2 spots in round 1 can be something, especially if there is, in their eyes, some sort of tier break.
So I've noticed this league is very active, and this is, again, it's an industry league. It's like, this is Mike Leone is the commissioner. It's mostly ETR guys and people who are, industry people. So I guess people are taking it more seriously. Is that more common? So I've gotten like 7 trade offers in the 4 days I've been in this league or whatever it is. Like people, and it's also like right around the start of the rookie draft,
right,
where all these trades are coming in. is that more common, you think, in Dynasty? Is that an industry league thing, or is it just this league in particular is very active? Or are they trying to take advantage of the new guy who's never been in a Dynasty league before? They're all targeting my picks.
Probably.
Is that what it is? They're just trying to take advantage of me?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a little bit of that. But I would say, so Dynasty is going to be way more active than your typical season-long league. Because I play in plenty of season-long leagues where barely any trades happen at all. Dynasty, though, the rookie draft is really where you see the most action. So that league in particular, like, it has windows. If I recall, there's windows during the season where you can trade. And so, there'll be like a 3-week window where you are like looking at rosters and trying to get trades done and stuff like that in season. But because there's these pockets, there's not just like you won't see trades going on. You won't get, I guarantee you, from middle of May through most of August, you're not going to get a single trade offer. I don't even know I don't know what the windows look like, but in Dynasty rookie drafts, like, people are throwing stuff around constantly. And that's what makes it so fun, because, if your valuation is different than someone else's, then this is also where you can really take advantage of like trade calculators that are out there. Because if your valuation differs, and a lot of times, like, one of the benefits of doing the prospect guide is I am literally influenced by nothing when I create the rankings and stuff. Like, I got the rankings out the night that the draft ended. I got the guide updated and sent out to people. And so when I'm doing that, I have no idea where anyone has anyone ranked. Right. So, like, at that point, I'm ranking Jarquez Hunter where I ranked him. I don't know if people are going to like landing spot or not. And so that's a benefit for me, just because then I kind of know how I feel about these guys, and I can manipulate like how things are going in the draft, and kind of look at like what a trade calculator is then saying like, oh, I know factually that I like this guy a lot more than where the market's placing him. And then that's where you kind of gain value. Or, if you lose the trade, you lose the trade. That happens sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see Fantasy Football Garage say agreeing with you on Egbuka versus Rome. Debro showing up in the chat. Always good to see two of my favorite Dynasty guys right here. One on the screen, one in the chat. Love to see it. So as far as evaluating picks, so you're talking about like taking the reroll of you traded Rome for that 1.08, and that's something that I do a lot of in my, like, generally, like, I'm in a lot of leagues with friends from home and stuff, like, friends of mine who are not necessarily the most serious. They're generally pretty serious, but like, you are kind of hoping like it's a good bet that, like, well, what if somebody just makes the wrong pick ahead of you, and like you're going to get a falling pinch on Judkins or whatever. Somebody could fall to you at the 108. So worst case, you're basically a coin flip, whatever. I'll take Egbuka over Rome, but like best case is you just get some value out of that pick. Does the league that you're in, like if you're in a sharp league, like an industry league, are you a little bit less likely to trade your picks, or are you more likely to trade your picks in an industry league because you know that people are going to make the right picks? You're less likely to get value out of those picks.
The interesting thing is that you will find what I found, at least, and because I'm in like half my leagues, I'd say, are not casual, but just not analysts, right? Like they're hardcore fantasy players, but they're not analysts. And then the other half are just filled with analysts and stuff. The interesting thing is the analyst drafts are usually a little bit more all over the place, because analysts are so cocky and arrogant with their takes.
Oh, that's funny.
And so like they'll take players way above ADP. Even though, I mean, you could say this about startup drafts, sure, but definitely in rookie drafts where, like, people aren't as tied to ADP in a rookie draft because they shouldn't be. Like, think about it this way, like in a typical like best ball draft or some sort of season long or even a startup draft, like the player pool is massive, right? So, and we've also seen these guys play in the NFL, so we have a better idea of the kind of player they are, and so we don't have to be as wild and crazy with the way that we value these players. When it comes to rookies, we've never seen them play. We're all just kind of like making educated guesses based on the information that we have. And so if you want to go for a player that you really like, go for the player that you really like. Like, I don't think that there's really a problem with that, just from a strictly like math and probability standpoint. Don't get stupid and don't be dumb, but like understand that if you're at the end of the second round of a rookie draft, where rookie picks generally start to tail off as you get into the, like, just based on history, as you get into like round 3 of like super flex leagues and like late round 2. And you definitely see that this year, where there's a big teardrop in the middle of round 2. don't feel so tied to ADP there, because you're talking about low probability hits to begin with. Just go get your guy that you can live with, that you passed up on, that you didn't pass up on him because your evaluation says he's better than he is, And so interestingly enough, like I'd say that in more of the industry drafts, I get more of the guys that I want oftentimes because people are just so enamored with their dudes, which I can respect. It's fun that way, but most of the time the other leagues I'm in, people are a little bit more tied to ADP.
That does kind of make sense, and that's funny that it works out that way. So again, like I told you, basically all of the I think actually literally all of the trade offers that have been thrown my way have been people trying to get my picks, and I have not consumed a ton of Dynasty content over the years. Again, this is my first league ever. I think the only Dynasty content that I've consumed has been kind of like, I'll click on, if you're on a show or Debro's on a show, or like somebody that I like who's doing a Dynasty show, I'll click on it and watch a little bit just for the entertainment, and maybe kind of accidentally pick up a little bit of knowledge about Dynasty. But generally what I think I picked up is that picks are really valuable. Like in Dynasty leagues in particular, just like having those draft picks are extremely valuable. Any like trade calculator that I look at suggests that future picks are a lot less valuable than current year picks.
Right.
Would you agree with that? Like a 2026 first round pick, is that like a random, like you obviously don't know where your pick is going to be. Would you value that significantly lower than this year's first round pick or 2027? Like the further out you get, do you value that pick less? And why would you say that is?
Yeah, so it's similar to like finance, where money now, it's like if you win the lottery, you should take the lump sum, because you can then take that money and invest it and see it and watch it grow, right? So if you have some sort of first rounder this year, that there's a chance for that first rounder to get exponentially more valuable if that player ends up hitting, right? Whereas if it's a first rounder next year, you have the volatility of it ends up being a later first than you expected it to be. It will gain some value because you're getting close, just given what you just said in the market. As we move forward, those picks do get more valuable, but it's just the money now is more valuable than money later kind of idea. And that's what people generally abide by, in Dynasty. The other thing with rookie picks and why they are valuable kind of goes back to that example that I shared with that Roma Dunze trade, where, the 108, like, you can sit there and here's another example. Right before we hopped on, one of my rookie drafts is at the 204, and Luther Burden was still on the board, which is pretty late for Burden to be on the board still. So it's around the time where like that teardrop is about to hit. So I started just crushing trade offers to the person who had that 204, because also if you go to a trade calculator and you put in the 204 instead of Luther Burden, then you can get an edge in that trade, because the 204 is less valuable than Luther Burden, because Luther Burden generally gets drafted ahead of the 204. But also like the Roma Dunze example, with me saying like maybe Quinshon Judkins would fall. The flexibility of that draft pick is really important too. You're not just drafting one player. I mean, you are drafting one player in that pick, but you're not locked into that player when you get that rookie pick and selection. There's a lot of different avenues that you can go with that pick. And that alone, that flexibility makes it really valuable as well. So, I generally tell people to like, think about the kind of player you would be drafting in that spot when you're making a trade for like a pick, right? So like, if you're trading the 112 straight up for some sort of asset, some sort of established veteran, just think of that trade as, Caleb Johnson or Matthew Golden for whatever the wide receiver is that you're trading for. And then you can make an easier one-to-one comparison with that, but also understand that there is more flexibility and more value because you have that flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. Bindle's comes in and says, good morning. Yeah. Oh no, not MFL. Do we have any comments? JJ? Okay. I wasn't going to like necessarily put you on the spot with a little bit of a fight that we've been having within league about discussing the different platforms and preferences. JJ,
it is insane to me. It is insane to me that people in that league, like I made the comment that like all of my leagues have basically transferred to Sleeper. And I'm only the Leone leagues are still on MFL, because my other MFL team league folded this offseason. So like I made the comment, I was like, Sleeper's way better. Like it's just a better UI. They've actually improved the product, each year and stuff like that. And everyone jumped on me. You saw it. I mean, everyone was like, I was the minority by far. No one else agreed with me. It was crazy.
I just didn't want to say it because I'm new to the league, but I think I agree with you too.
Yeah.
Pat Thorman told me not to fall for your propaganda, your big sleeper propaganda, but I don't know how to navigate this league. As I mentioned, like just trying to make my draft pick, I couldn't figure out how to do it on MFL. It took me like 10 minutes to find the right spot to make the draft pick. Maybe I'll get used to it and love it ultimately, but.
And look, the people at MFL are great, and MFL has played a really important part in the growth and the journey of fantasy football. But I think it's fine for us to have opinions. And my opinion is that I am sick of the UI of MFL.
All right, we're going to get out here soon, but I have just a couple more questions here first. Now, first of all, this year in particular is, and I don't know if you agree with this, but like everybody is basically saying like this is not a great year for wide receivers in dynasty leagues. Unfortunately, that's exactly what our team, my team needs are now. Do you think I should be like actively shopping my picks because like the best picks are generally running backs, or do you think at this point in the draft it's like we're already kind of past the point where that makes sense we're like mid-second round now?
I mean, you can do that. I would say though, more so, this is a team where you can make the choice if you want to compete or not. Like it's kind of on that fringe. Like you could hypothetically scale back and start selling off assets and try to look at 2026, 20, or maybe 2027 and say, I'm just going to be beastly then and still have like a Jahmyr Gibbs, probably sell off Saquon, CMC, all that kind of stuff. But I do think that like, you look at the again, going back to the production and value thing, look at the assets that are producers on this team. And some of them, a good number of them actually, like AJ Brown is probably going to start to see a decline in value after this year. DK Metcalf already took a hit with going to Pittsburgh, but he might even start to see a little bit of a decline. CMC is going to hit a decline. You know, you kind of have to, with Najee Harris, you have to kind of hope that, that like Amari, like that maybe you can even, if you were to sell this team, like I would wait to sell a guy like Najee Harris to see if like Amari Hampton maybe doesn't see the workload that we would expect, or he gets injured, right? And Najee Harris is just the RB1 in that team. And then you could flip him mid-season to get something pretty substantial just because he's the RB1 for that team for that year. But you know, it's a team where like you have to just consciously like make that decision and say, what am I going to do here? And if that decision is I'm going to try to win now, sure, you can trade some picks. I mean, I think that if I, like I said earlier, if I were to win now on this team, I would take the players who are valuable, but maybe not giving me the production side as much, like a Justin Herbert, and especially because you have Josh Allen, take the Justin Herbert piece and sell for a lot of bodies and good pieces and improve that wide receiver room while maybe getting like a Geno Smith type, right? Where like, would you be shocked out of your mind if Geno Smith, like, what do you think the probability is that Geno Smith outscores Justin Herbert this year in fantasy? Like
35, 40%?
Yeah, right. Like, it's not like, of course we're going to side with Justin Herbert, but I don't think we'd be like shocked out of our minds if Geno Smith had an outlier season in touchdown rate and he just outscores Justin Herbert, right?
Yeah.
You can use that to your advantage and say, okay, I'm going to compete now. So I'll flip Justin Herbert and get a good, get another quarterback to at least throw in there, and because it is super flex, but then also build out wide receiver because Justin Herbert is going to give me a pretty nice return while also maintaining my picks. You know, I think a lot of times, especially like with you first joining Dynasty right now, you think that the only way you can really get like veterans and those kinds of assets on your team is by flipping your rookie picks. Mm-hmm. But really, it's by looking at your existing assets and saying, how can I just translate this and move this into making it a more balanced roster throughout, you know, whereas right now it's just very, very top heavy with quarterback and running back.
Okay, JJ, one final question before we get out of here. I need to, so for every pick that I make, we have 30-man rosters. For every pick that I make, I need to drop somebody. Can you help me figure out who I can drop? So far I've dropped Jamal Williams. I feel like I don't really know who Dalen Holker is. I looked him up.
You
He's
can probably drop
25.
him. You can probably drop him. You can probably drop. I mean, Michael Thomas is probably toast at this point.
I was thinking that too.
And people looking at this roster too. This is a team that you don't touch for like I hadn't touched this team in like a year, so that's why there's some of these guys on there. Jalen Brooks you can drop more than likely. I mean, I don't know how many more picks. I mean, Rasheen Ali maybe. Cam Akers maybe. You know, you can start to get into that too. those would probably be the top of my.
John Mechie, do you think he's, or you would put him behind the rest?
I'd probably hold just in case, with the volatility of the rookies and such, but it would just depend on how many picks he would be on the short list. Yeah.
Yeah. Jim says Michael Thomas is probably toast this point.
Yeah. I mean, like Michael Thomas is, yeah. He's by the way, in this league, I had traded for Michael Thomas literally 2 weeks before his final injury. Like
brutal.
His dynasty, like, oh my gosh. And T Higgins was part of that trade, and it is devastating. Because I had
still a pretty good team.
I had a lot of T Higgins across my dynasty leagues, and I was like, okay, I need to diversify. Oh, here's a win now team. And then I went after Michael Thomas, and literally, I'm not even kidding, 2 weeks later is when they announced he had that foot injury, and then he's never returned from that injury.
That is, yeah.
It's devastating.
It's crazy. This is still like, this team could have been just an absolute juggernaut if things went a different way. Like some of these players, Deontay Johnson, Michael Thomas, like so many of these are just
crazy.
Oh my God, they could have been so good.
Yeah.
All right. We are going to get out of here, Bindles. Thank you. I will check that out later. Appreciate you. But JJ, really appreciate you coming on the show. I know that I heard earlier today that you are going on ship chasing later this week.
Unfortunately. Right? Yeah. No. I will be 3, I think, on Thursday.
Anything else that you have coming up that people should be looking out for? I know you already kind of teased you've got best ball, something in the works, and anything else that people should be looking out for from you?
Yeah, I'm kind of transitioning a little bit to season long again, because it's that time of year now that rookie drafts are at least starting and in the middle of, and I've done all the prospect guide stuff. Definitely check out the prospect guide over on lateround.com, but also just the late round podcast is where you'll get all the information you need from me. I'll at least like announce anything and talk about anything that I'm working on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely worth checking out. You can find JJ on Twitter at LateRoundQB. If you're not already following him, obviously a great follow there as well. But yeah, a lot of good stuff coming up, and looking forward to watching that stuff. Thank you very much, JJ, once again, and thank you all for checking out the stream. I will also be doing more best ball content. I think probably starting next week is when I'm going to start getting back into best ball content. So check me out there right here on the Flannelverse. But we are out here. Thank you very much, JJ. Thanks everybody. Catch you later.